Welcome to Metro Talk. I'm Kent Sheffield. Thanks for being with us. Sam Sten, the President and General Manager of WBGZ, is here. Welcome, Sam.
Glad to be here, Kent.
And Pat Gowan, one of the editors with the Post-Dispatch, is alongside. Welcome, Pat.
Hi, Kent.
Pat, the trial of former Governor Blagojevich is over now. He was convicted on 17 of the 20 counts that had been filed against him. Bottom line, are we going to see the former governor go quietly off to prison now, or are we going to see a lot of comments from him during a lengthy appeals process?
Well, it did seem to mute him a bit when he was convicted. I imagine the imagery that's been reported of him setting his head on the table and looking at his lawyer and saying, "What just happened?" which comports with what I've suspected all along. I think Blagojevich strikes me as the kind of kid who can't believe he's being suspended because the firecrackers that he set off in the high school gym burned the place down. You know, it's like, how did this happen? How could this possibly happen to me? Whether he will go anywhere quietly, I don't know, but right now the court has a close hold on sensitive parts. He's not going to be leaving Northern Illinois without permission from the court, and I expect that will preclude another round of the TV talk shows if he were up to that, which he probably isn't anyway. Status hearing in the case August 11. Sentencing will be set after that time. He can remain on bond during his appeal if the judge agrees to it, but there is a bar for that to be met, and the bar is that you've got to show likelihood of success on appeal. Governor Ryan is still in prison, and he was in during his appeals. He could not get an appeal bond. I'd be surprised if Blagojevich did, which means I'm imagining Blagojevich will be in prison by Halloween, maybe in prison by Labor Day, might be even sooner than that, and the reality of it will just become that much stronger in his face. I really believe he was a guy who was not prepared to be convicted, even though he'd been convicted on one count by the earlier jury, and I think he's not prepared for the realities of prison. How much prison time has been a subject of speculation since the verdict. Some legal experts say maybe 10 years. Some say 6 or 7. The federal sentencing system has a series of guidelines by which calculations are made. For example, was a gun used in the crime? No. Was anyone harmed physically during the crime? No. Were drugs involved? No. Did it involve a breach of public trust? Yes. So the little dot keeps going up and down on the graph until they reach a guideline recommendation that at one time was mandatory for the judges and now is only advisory, so Judge Zagel can do pretty much what he wants. But how quiet it'll be a lot quieter than it was in the ramp up to it. I think relatively quietly he will simply fade away into prison.
Surprising, though, somewhat from the standpoint that, as you mentioned, it was in the Post-Dispatch. When the verdict is handed down, he turns to his attorney and says, "What happened?" Was it the attorney's fault at that point?
Says well, I don't know what the man expected. Look at the guy's background. He's a law school graduate. He worked as a prosecutor on small-scale cases. He served in the legislature. He served as a congressman. He got elected governor twice. He's never lost an election. He can't possibly not know what happened, except in his own sort of strange view of the world. I think he really believed this simply could not happen to him, that the laws of man, maybe even the laws of physics, don't apply to Governor Blagojevich. And it's sort of reached, I think, a logical conclusion for someone who careens through life like he did. Remember that the wiretaps that the FBI made that put him away had been rumored. He'd made jokes about having the FBI listening to him when in fact they really were. It didn't seem to slow him down a bit. It was like the rules don't apply.
Sam, are we going to see a quiet send-off to the former governor, or are we going to see a very lengthy appeal with a lot of comments?
Well, if his demeanor immediately after the verdict is any indication, he's going to be fairly quiet. You know, he came out in front of the cameras and said very little, and even alluded to the fact that apparently he had talked too much. And you get the sense that his lawyers finally got through to him and said, you know, it's in your best interest, Governor, to keep quiet. About all he said was that he was stunned and that he and Patty were going to go home and explain things to their girls. It is to his benefit to be quiet. And I think what the real question is, when it comes time for the sentencing, at some point, Judge Zagel is going to ask Blagojevich, ask him to show some contrition. Because at this point now, he is convicted. He is guilty. Up until now, we had the presumption of innocence. Now he is guilty. A jury has come back and said he is guilty of these crimes. And, his lawyers are going to want him to show some contrition in front of the judge in order to try to lop some time off his sentencing. So I think the real question is going to be, what is Judge Zagel's demeanor going to be? Is he going to take into account that Blagojevich has been out there, positioning himself as a reformer, somebody who was out to fix a corrupt system, when he in fact was the corrupt one? Judge Zagel is fully aware that Blagojevich was out there doing talk shows and doing reality shows, and in the minds of some attempting to taint the jury pool. So is that going to factor into the judge's decision? As Pat said, he's got these guidelines under which he'll act, but there's a huge range there. And then the judge is going to try and decide, do I want to make an example of Blagojevich? Do I want, his fate to be a deterrent to people in the future? Of course, it doesn't seem, the fact that 3 previous governors in Illinois went to prison didn't seem to work as a deterrent. So, the question will be, will he throw the book at him? So it is in Rod Blagojevich's best interest to keep quiet, to be contrite, to accept responsibility before the judge for his actions, and possibly even apologize. Whether he's capable of all of that, it's hard to fathom that. But maybe he really is smarter than we think he is, and maybe now that the die is cast, maybe he'll do what is in his best interest. That's what he's done up until this point, what is in his best interest, or what he thought was in his best interest. He was trying to feather his own nest with his position. But whether he can keep his mouth shut and whether he can be contrite is an open question.
I'm listening to Sam talk about that, and I'm trying to imagine him unconditionally taking responsibility for the crimes. And it's almost beyond my comprehension, given what we've seen of the guy over his career.
But it is in his best interest. The judge, I'm sure Judge Zagel will want to see that, and I'm sure that will play. If he thinks, hey, if I give this guy what is perceived as a light sentence, and 10 years from now he's out here Roman proclaiming himself to be back and to be victorious and to have beaten the system, well then maybe I ought to send him away for 20 or 30.
Were you surprised that he was subdued following the verdict?
A little bit, yeah. Yeah, because it's so much out of his character. You could have imagined him coming out and saying, well, this is only a temporary setback. We've already got plans in place for an appeal, and I still maintain my innocence, and I'm just misunderstood and all of that. And I'm sure deep down inside, that's what he really wanted to say. But it really did appear to me that somebody got in his face and said, you better keep your mouth shut and, don't say anything. And for him to say simply that he was stunned, that was about the best he could say, which I'm sure was truthful. But the very fact that he mentioned that, well, I've probably talked too much in the past, so I'm not going to say much now, indicated to me that somebody did get in his face and say, you better keep quiet.
We need to take a break. We'll talk about the special legislative session right after this.
Hi, I'm Audrey Lucchese, and I'm from Alton, Illinois. I love music, and that's why I came to Lewis & Clark. It's been an amazing experience here at Lewis & Clark, working with students that are so talented, coming from all over the area, and they work so hard to follow their dreams. The music faculty at Lewis & Clark they're fantastic, and they're there every step of the way to push you to follow your dreams. One of the unique opportunities that I have had at Lewis & Clark is being able to record my own music with a fellow student here. Being able to record our music has opened doors for us in the music industry. My long-term goal is to finish here at Lewis & Clark and then to transfer to a 4-year school and finish my degree in music performance. I would recommend Lewis & Clark to another student because it is definitely a great place to get started, and it can open so many doors for you.
Big dreams and good grades aren't enough to get into college. There are actual steps you need to take. Finding someone who can help is the first and most important. For the next steps, go to knowhowtogo.org.
You're watching Metro Talk. I'm Kent Sheffield. Pat Gowan and Sam Stemmer here. Sam, Illinois lawmakers met in a special legislative session last week. They were called back to the Capitol. They voted to spend $18 billion to continue capital projects around the state. Was it a good vote? Do you agree with it?
Well, first of all, and I don't mean to correct you, but technically it did not meet the definition of a special session. But, and that kind of set the parameters for what they got paid and how the whole thing worked. And actually, it didn't last very long at all. Some folks in the legislature traveled longer than they actually met this past week. And really, it was pretty much a technicality. Both houses had passed the bill, but there was a lingering amendment that the Senate passed that the House hadn't agreed to. And so when they showed up this past week, the amendment was withdrawn, and the capital spending bill went through. Well, do I agree with it? Was it a good vote? Well, it's really hard for me to agree with much that the legislature has done lately. Even Governor Quinn points out that technically the budget is not balanced because they've done some sleight of hand and taken some current expenses that they'll book in 2013, and so technically that creates a scenario whereby the budget is close to balance, but not really. It's a sizable amount of money that's just in essence being deferred until a later time, and basically it becomes the next legislature's problem. And so it's pretty much just more of the same. In Springfield, they had to pass the capital projects bill, and as I said, it was pretty much just kind of house cleaning when they showed up for a couple hours to get that done. And so now the question becomes down the road: is Governor Quinn going to call them back for a real special session or not? And we'll see how that all goes.
Pat, did the lawmakers make the right move last week in approving that $18 billion that will go towards capital spending?
Well, as we talked about a little bit on a previous show, there's an argument about whether they needed to do this at all. There's a lapse spending provision. There were many people who thought the projects are not in jeopardy. They've got until December to do what they were called back to do, so that it really didn't have any effect on anything except making absolute sure that the construction projects didn't stop, but they probably weren't going to be stopped anyway by a failure to act. It seems to me it had more to do with the Senate Democrats attempting to add $430 million, not billion, thank heavens, to social spending and human services and education that they felt had been shortchanged in the earlier budget talks, and they were trying to slip that through as an amendment on the road bill, and the only way they got the road bill through was to remove it, so that's still out there for another day. I think that was the real reason for the whole thing. That fell by the wayside. It's kind of a non-story.
Sam, while the lawmakers were in Springfield, they also voted to cut their salaries. They're going to save a total of about $500,000 a year by taking the pay cuts. Was that a good move on their part?
Well, probably a good PR move. If people look at that and say, well, okay, they're sharing in the sacrifice. There's a lot of pain to go around. And what was most striking to me were the handful of the ones I heard speak out, I think specifically, were senators, a couple of them from the Chicago area, who were vehemently opposed to this. It's like, we earn our money and we deserve this, and this is not right. And it's like you figure when you heard that those folks were in pretty safe seats, because that I don't think played well. That's probably why it got so much notice in various media outlets, was because The contrast there was from the public mood to what these so-called public servants were saying over what is a relatively minor pay cut. So, $500,000 is $500,000, or what was it? How much did they say?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, $500,000. Yeah, $500,000. It's not horribly significant in the whole scope of the state budget, but symbolically, yeah, it probably does play pretty well, and it was probably a better move than not doing it at all. Once it was proposed, those who did oppose it probably didn't do themselves any favors, but they probably were in very safe seats.
Pat, was it a good move on the lawmakers' part to cut their salaries last week while they were back in Springfield?
Well, we've had employees take furloughs. We have increased your taxes by 2/3, and we have done not much of anything discernible to solve the problems of the state. So it seems like a reasonable thing to be cutting their pay at least that much. So I understand the base pay for a legislator is a little over $67,000 plus various committee assignment. For a $67,000 a year legislator, it's about $3,100. It's a significant amount of money, but a lot of the people who work for them and pay taxes to them are suffering through significant amounts of losses or increased taxes anyway. So it's pretty hard to imagine not doing this. I would like to guarantee to you that if I were one of those senators, I would not be standing up and making a big fuss on my own behalf. And of course, theoretically, these are part-time jobs. Many of these people do this full-time, but the whole idea of it was that they would be part-time legislators. I think they're still considered to be, aren't they, Sam? That Illinois is not considered to have a full-time legislator, but effectively it is.
Were you surprised they did it so quickly? There hadn't been a whole lot of discussion about this.
No, I think this is one of those things that didn't have so much pressure on it to get done by a particular point of view. It's just there's a fear that at some point the voters would say, hey, did they ever, are they still getting their full pay? So this is a way, as it occurs to people, to have already taken care of it. I don't think it was a result of a particular upswell or outcry for them to do it.
We need to take a break. We'll have more right after this.
Hello and welcome to the Lewis and Clark Minute. Today we're going to check out the radio broadcasting program in WLCA with Mike Lemons.
Have you ever listened to your favorite radio station or your favorite disc jockey and say, I could do that? Or maybe you're the type of person who says, I could never do something like that. Well, with the help of first-year mass comm student John, we're going to show you just how easy it is. Each voice intro starts with talking about the band that just played, and we add a station identifier. Next, you want to offer some information that may be of interest to your audience. And finally, tell the listeners what the next song is, who sings it, followed by another station identifier. John will do one live now.
Silver Sun Pickup Substitution on WLCA. The Big Pink released their debut album called A Brief History of Love. This single is off that album. It's The Big Pink with Dominoes. It's on College Radio's Best, 89.9.
This has been your Lewis and Clark Minute.
What's that? I don't know. Something I kind of made. Ooh, what's it do?
What do I do? Well, thanks for asking. I ring my bell and I like to dance. What do I do? Well, thanks for asking.
Ow! Yeah, it still needs a little work.
Anything's possible. Keep thinking. Get started on your own inventions or just play some games at inventnow.org.
Sounds like you could use some Van Gogurt. It's fortified with arts-rich nutrients to improve your math and reading skills. Catch!
Van Gogurt, thanks. So what's the deal with your ear?
Always with the ear, huh?
Feed your kids the arts. For 10 simple ways to learn how, visit AmericansForTheArts.org.
This is Metro Talk. I'm Kent Sheffield. Pat Gowan's alongside. Sam Stem is here. Pat, as Sam mentioned earlier, Governor Quinn says we really don't have a balanced budget this year. We're about $1 billion off. A lot of that's because bills that have been due have been pushed back to 2013 so that our budget looks balanced. The bottom line is, are we playing a game with the budget?
I don't remember a time when we weren't playing this particular game with the budget. A balanced budget's very easy to understand. within the year, you spend what you take in and you meet all your obligations. You know, pushing $1 billion, and it's probably a lot more than that, but pushing $1 billion of bills from one year to the next to get it off your books is not by any measure a balanced budget. Now, the state constitution requires a balanced budget. No one ever seems to make an issue of that. This has been going on smoke and mirrors for session after session. It just gets worse. So I'm really tickled to see that Governor Quinn and the Illinois Policy Institute have gotten together to recognize the problem, although they don't particularly agree on a solution. Public Policy Institute, I think, would like to see greater cut in spending. The governor would like to see at least more borrowing to balance things out. So it kind of tells us what we already knew and delivers us right back to where we knew we were. And something tells me that a budget will pass, $33.2 billion as proposed now, or maybe it will be adjusted, but in any event, it will not be balanced, nor will it be next year when we're sitting here talking about the same thing.
So what do we do when lawmakers are ignoring the Constitution?
Well, you could sue, I suppose. I don't know how you compel them to do this. I don't know what the penalty is. The Constitution says you've got to do it. Sam may have a better idea than me. You could sue, I guess you could sue the General Assembly, but who is held responsible? You spend a lot of money in pressing litigation, but in the end, it doesn't put anything more in the pot. I'm not even saying they're not doing what they may have to do at this moment in time. The real question for me is, what are they doing to get us out of it? And it appears truly not a lot.
Sam, Governor Quinn says the budget's off by $1 billion because bills have been pushed back to 2013. That way we have a balanced budget on paper anyway. We're just playing a game.
Absolutely, it's a game. The Illinois Policy Institute agrees with the governor. Now, Pat said the governor, he wants to borrow more money, but I don't really see the difference between borrowing money to meet your obligations or just saying, hey, we're going to let the obligations come due next year. It'd be nice if I could do that in my own budget. Just tell certain creditors, you know what, I've used your services or I've taken your product this year, but let's make the bill due 2 years from now. That'll help me out. Your question earlier was, what can we do about it? Well, we can do something about it at the ballot box next time around. I think really that's the only recourse voters have. If you don't like the way the current elected officials are handling things, you always have the opportunity to change the players. And quite frankly, I think we see it nationally. We haven't seen it so much in Illinois, but maybe it's coming. But a lot of people have made light of the Tea Party movement and say, oh, well, it's a bunch of nutcases or this or that or the other. But actually, somebody had to vote for those people. And to a certain extent, I think that in some cases is the electorate saying, yeah, these people might be different, calling themselves Tea Party members, but maybe that's what we need, is something different. Maybe they will really go and change things. But I'm always reminded of Everett, the late Everett Dirksen, when he was the senior senator from the state of Illinois, and talking about issues like this. And of course, his line was $1 million here and $1 million here, and pretty soon you're talking about real money. Now we're talking billions and trillions. But, at some point in time, it adds up to real money. And after the taxpayers have already been hit with a 67% increase in the state income tax and other taxes and fees are going up, at some point in time, I really do believe that voters are going to demand that, hey, you're our elected officials, you're in charge, and we want you to address it. And my last thought on this is, it almost smacks to me, Governor Quinn pointing this out, it almost smacks of him playing defense already, trying to say, well, if our financial situation gets worse, it's not my fault. I told you the legislature didn't balance the budget. I tried to call them on it, and they didn't do anything about it. It's almost like he's already trying to deflect any blame for any future hardships by pointing out that the legislature hasn't done its job. But I don't hear him proposing a solution either.
Go on. I get three quick thoughts. One of them is, Lord, who imagined when they increased our income taxes 2/3 that we'd still be sitting around scratching our heads like we were? I mean, what in the world would our problems be if we didn't have that? What is that, $8 or $9 billion? My God, how bad a shape are we in? Another thought, the recession we're in is almost unprecedented in modern times, and certainly the duration of it. And to some extent, that's playing into the problem because nobody could have anticipated that the recovery would take so long and be so weak. The third thing is, I think Sam raised the difference between what we're doing in a loan, and the difference between what we're doing in a loan is, if you had a loan and you're the banker, you know you're lending the state money. That what we're doing is, if I'm a pharmacist and I send the state a bill, I'm lending the state money, but I didn't know I was lending the state money, and there was no negotiation of the interest terms. I'm just stuck with what they want to pay me, when they want to pay it to me, with the interest rate that they're willing to pay. So there is that bit of a difference between a loan and what we're doing. On the other hand, as long as nobody will give them a loan, as long as the legislature won't approve a loan, we are so maxed out on our spending that we're unlikely to make it worse. If you get a loan, then theoretically you could pay these people off and start stiffing them again. So there's got to be the trust. Before you can have the loan, there's got to be absolute trust you're going to do the right thing from that point. And that's really what's lacking right now. It isn't just that the Republicans and Democrats don't trust each other. The Democrats don't trust a lot of each other either. And how you're going to restore that, I don't know. But in these tough times, trust means a lot toward getting this problem solved.
And let me add one other point to that. I recently talked to the head of a social service agency that provides services to the elderly with the reimbursement coming from the state. And this individual was telling me that it's not going to be too much longer and they're just going to stop providing the services because they can't afford to continue to provide the services without the money flowing. And what he said was, and once we get to that point in time, because he said we can't continue to employ people to provide these services without paying them, once it gets to that point in time, he said, we're just going to be able to tell the recipients that, hey, go talk to your legislator. It's their fault. They're not sending us any money. We can't continue to pay the people providing the services, and you're just out of luck. Go talk to your state senator, go talk to your state legislator. And at that point in time, look out, because there are a lot of people dependent upon these services, in many instances, just to be able to stay in their homes.
That's going to do it for this edition of Metro Talk. Thanks for being with us. I'm Kent Sheffield. Pat Gowan with the Post-Dispatch has been here, along with Sam Stem from WBGZ. We'll see you next time.